Well, let's see if we can't help you answer that viewer question by speaking to one of our regular experts here on eNCA with our focus on lawlessness in the country. It's the spate of tavern shootings raising concerns about firearms and gun control laws. More than 130 AK-47 cartridges were collected from the scene of the Soweto massacre. But we need to start going down into the story, start going to deeper levels. Does government need to urgently ramp up gun control? Is it government's problem? How do we deal with illegal firearms? There's a lot to discuss. Let's find out then from Stellenbosch University, Dr. Guy Lamb, criminologist in the politics department. Dr. Lamb, good to have you with us on eNCA as always. Are we a lawless country? Let's start there.
Well, I mean, that's quite a general question, and it really depends where you are. I mean, it's the situation around, it's quite inconsistent. So there is the law was applied in certain areas on certain crimes and others it's not. I mean, I think we've certainly seen a lot poorer areas where the level of policing is quite low, where, you know, citizens and residents don't necessarily trust the police. Crimes happen but don't result in convictions. And it has to do with the sense of, you know, the state not really being in a position to secure convictions and residents in those areas not really being willing to cooperate with the police or the criminal justice system. So you get into this kind of catch-22 situation where citizens would like to live in a kind of a law-abiding society, but, you know, not necessarily contributing towards it, but also, you know, the state not necessarily doing the job it's supposed to be doing.
Yeah, and it just seems like we're starting to pass the proverbial ball around the room. Depending on who you talk to, somebody else is at fault, whether it's a minister or a commissioner or it's because we have too many guns. Where would you begin to unpack this big discussion, though, around lawlessness, especially off the back of the tavern shootings that we saw? Do we need tighter gun controls? Do we need more police? What would you, if you were sitting with the appropriate minister, Dr. Lamb, what would you tell that minister?
Of course, I mean, we're talking in different forms of lawlessness. So if we just focus on the tavern shootings and working with the information that we have, and we really have to sort of speculate at this particular point in time. But essentially what we do know, and it's the sort of a case we've seen within Khayelitsha and the sort of tavern and shebeen shootings that have been happening there and a few other parts of South Africa, is it seems to be an organized criminal group that have individuals or, you know, experts in the use of violence at their disposal. So they're either hired or they're part of this particular group, and they have access to certain types of weapons. So it's handguns, in some cases, semi-automatic or fully automatic weapons. So we know in Soweto, the indication that there were, you know, kind of AK type ammunition, which is suggestions that the individuals had fully automatic military style weapons. So the point to kind of, if one wants to deal specifically with that, this is about an organized criminal group that has specific objectives. So here you do need dedicated police resources, police expertise, investigative intelligence gathering kind of expertise to deal with that specific problem. You know, sort of it's the same thing if we go back just over a year ago to the looting and to the insurrection and unrest that happened mainly in KwaZulu-Natal and parts of Gauteng. I mean, that's the sort of on a much grander scale, but it's the sense of around you're seeing organized criminal groups with certain agendas engaging. So here you do need specialized, focused police resources. You do need the kind of expertise to be able to investigate and in a way kind of prevent these sort of acts from happening. So it really is around exposes the weaknesses of crime intelligence.
It does.
Your question about gun control.
Yeah, it certainly does, Prof. And let me, Doctor, forgive me. Let me just ask you as a last question about that, because you and I, we've spoken a number of times. We've spoken to various experts about the inefficiencies of the police, what they need, how desperately short-staffed they are. The problem is criminals could be watching us right now, looking at this. It's not a secret. We know how understaffed police are, to the point, and I think this is what drives it home for me. Tell me if you agree. We've had police stations robbed by criminals in the past, where they've walked in, held up the police and walked off with firearms. That's got to be the most ironic way of looking at this.
I mean, it's yes, but it's obviously a bit more complicated than that. I mean, the situation is there are many police stations throughout South Africa that are well managed, that investigate the crimes that they need to investigate, you know, motivate their staff, certainly from the kind of station commander's point of view. But there are many others that are a challenge. And if we look at, for example, the thefts of weapons from police stations, it's not all police stations. It's largely those vulnerable police stations. So we've seen organized criminal groups target certain police stations in sort of deeper rural areas, usually which, you know, they're understaffed, they don't have enough staff, and so the robberies happen at night. and then the weapons are removed. But of course, there is a key problem around corruption, and that's what's been a problem. I mean, we have issues around gun control, but we do have a specific problem around corruption in terms of organized criminal groups that have been able to access police weapons and access ammunition. And these are certainly issues that need to be addressed.
And just as I say goodbye to you, perhaps I'll leave this as my last question. I see it on screen. It seems like an obvious question for me to end off on this. I spoke to a little bit earlier Gun Free South Africa Director Adele Kirsten. Should we have tighter gun laws in our country? Very briefly, Doctor.
Well, I mean, we have, the laws certainly have improved over the years. I mean, the kind of key challenges around the administration, which is a major problem around the necessary background checks, that's taking too long for that to happen. The pro-gun groups, the groups that kind of support, not such tight legislation, kind of are raising concerns about this kind of issue. But I think a key problem is we have diversion. We have weapons that are legally held either by police or civilians that through loss and theft end up in the hands of criminals. And we really need to be doing is to stop that diversion or reduce that diversion as much as possible, because that has implications for violent crime.
Yeah, guns kill people, people don't kill people. Criminologist and lecturer at Stellenbosch University, Dr. Guy Lamb, always good to have you on eNCA. I'm sure we'll speak again as we continue our focus on lawlessness here in South Africa.